All right, and now we have a very, very quick clip, which I'm sure you will all remember. We'll just roll that clip if you can, guys. Take a quick look at that. You gotta love that theme, huh, folks? So great. Okay, first off, we're going to be bringing out Margot Rose. So let's have a nice welcome for Margot. She plays Eline in the episode. It's Margot Rose. Yes, please, Margot. It's fantastic to have you here, dear. So great to have you here. Next up, the gentleman who wrote the story and actually co-wrote the teleplay. It's our own Morgan Gendel. We love Morgan. Come on out, Morgan. Currently executive producer on the 100, right? Doing a great job on the 100 as well. Yeah, good idea. And last but not least, please welcome Sir Patrick Stewart. I thought about doing two couches, and then I thought it would be nice to just have everybody snuggled up together. Come on, let's hear it for them, ladies and gentlemen. There they are. Your conspirators and the inner lights. Patrick, I greatly regret that Daniel isn't here with us.
Me too. That is my son, who was in a light playing my son. He's the same guy who was playing my son in Blunt Talk, if any of you watched Blunt Talk. If any of you can find out why we cancelled, I'd appreciate hearing it. My son was going to be here, right? He was booked, but the lucky lad did a great job working at the Royal National Theatre in London, and he's got a job there for 6 months, so I'm very proud of him.
Proud daddy. So, since Daniel is in absentia, can we just speak a couple of minutes about his contribution to the episode and how it felt like working with him, and if you can kind of recall how it went down during the actual shoot?
Yes, he was very nervous, I remember. I think it's possible he had never seen a film camera before, that this was his very first time on camera. The only other time I'd worked with him was when he was doing his A-levels, which are the last exams you do before college or university. His set text for his English exam was King Lear, and we sat in his room for several weeks and read it and talked about it and worked on it. And my primary memory of that is that I kept having to excuse myself because I was crying too much while reading. There was something about reading King Lear's lines with my son playing the other roles that was very, very emotional. Well, I've been offered the part now in 2020. If we're all still around then, come and find me.
Which we will.
Well, hopefully. Yes, I'm not sure that I'm up for it, but I'll probably give it a go, you know.
Anyway, Daniel is not here, but...
Daniel is not here, but he's doing fine. He's
remembered very fondly.
I just remember how nervous he was about it all, and I was trying to reassure him and calm him down. And I still think, even to this day, he's not too pleased with the work that he did in that show. But it's fine, it's absolutely fine. And they'd been auditioning actors when I said to Rick Berman, look, I've got a son who's an actor who looks like me. I mean, why don't we just employ him instead of employing other people? Yeah? And so we did, and it was, it's unreliable, like me. Hello. And we have worked together since then, not only on Blunt Talk, but he directed me the last time that I did Christmas Carol on stage. I got very insecure about what I was doing, and so I said, look, would you come in and just, I'm going to do a run-through just for you and take some notes. And he did, and the notes were wonderful, so I said, well, listen, let's do a week's work, and we did a week's work on the production, just the two of us, which was a great experience. It's a nice thing when your son is in the same business as you and you can share these things, which we do now significantly.
He did a hysterical stint on Blunt Talk. He really was funny as hell.
I agree. He was marvelous, and
Fantastic.
It was one of the things that I'm so many reasons why I'm bitterly disappointed that the show got cancelled after 2 seasons. But my primary concern now for that show, and certainly for Daniel, who's an English actor, Dolly Wells, who is a wonderful English actress who is in the show, the great Adrian Scarborough, who played Harry, my manservant, and also, oh, come on, Patrick, you can do this. You got so far, you can finish it off. Tristram Shapiro. How could you forget a name like Tristram Shapiro, who was our senior director on the series and also one of the executive producers? 4 English, and me, 5 English actors and a director. And yet the show has not even been seen anywhere in England. Nobody knows about it at all. And so I'm now trying to fight a battle, finding what I have to do to get the series bought and screened in the UK.
And hopefully that'll be rectified.
Hopefully.
Okay, so Morgan, tell us the genesis of the story, the project, and how it came to Next Generation.
Sure. The way it started was Joe Manoski, a writer on the show, got me an appointment to pitch to Michael Piller, the showrunner, and I said yes, because this was sort of my MO. I agreed to take the appointment without having any idea what I was going to pitch. So I thought this would be some motivation for me. So I was standing at my toddler daughter's window. She just got married a few months ago, thank you.
Wow.
So time has gone by. And I looked out and saw the Fuji blimp going by. Does anybody remember the Fuji blimp in Los Angeles?
We still see it.
Yeah, except they don't make film anymore. I don't know what they're... So this thing looked very futuristic to me, and I thought, what would that be in a couple hundred years? And I thought it would be some kind of advertising or communications satellite that beamed whole memories into people's minds. I invented fake news. That's what it was. I apologize for that. And then we sort of took it from there. I had to come in and pitch it 5 different times. It kept getting better each time. And it just grew in the telling and became more a very personal story for Captain Picard. And that's when we knew we had something.
And just if for some reason any of you don't recall the basic concept behind it, a satellite, an alien probe of some sort, kind of zaps Captain Picard, and Picard goes into an ancestral memory of another life, which turns out to be a civilization in passing. And he lives a whole lifetime inside of this sort of dream while Picard himself is, in a coma, unconscious. And this probe has, in essence, related the oral and mental history of the society that is lost.
Yeah, it's carrying on the memory of a civilization we later learned had died already.
What is the MO, what is the reason, the raison d'etre for them having created this way of perpetuating the history? Were they trying to present a lesson to the societies that would come upon it subsequently, or is this just really carrying the memory so that they can carry the memory forward?
I think they knew they were going to die because their sun was going nova, and this was the only way they could live on, was by finding one man good and true, this guy, to have these memories inside his head and carry on the memory of this civilization.
Let's talk a little bit about what the way the episode is structured. Your first act, basically, they encounter the probe, and Captain Picard gets zapped, and he suddenly finds himself in another life. Patrick, when you were presented with this story and this concept, did you develop a strategy for becoming, for Picard now entering into a new personality, and first, still being Picard's personality and slowly losing his essence of his personality as he eventually becomes absorbed into the personality of Kamen?
Well, initially, I was simply Picard. I'd been zapped, and then I came around, and I was in a strange place that meant very little, nothing to me at all, but I was Captain Picard. And gradually, this had happened to me, and I knew I knew there was an Enterprise. I knew I
still had Picard's ego.
Yeah, Picard's ego and experience, but he had been translated into a different society and civilization, and as it turned out, it was one that he became very fond of and affectionate about, and met a wife, and had children and grandchildren, and gradually, and this was the most interesting part of the script to work on, very gradually the memories of his other life disappeared. Not completely, though. There was always an element of them there, and he completely committed himself to living a totally other life than the one that he had spent on the Enterprise and in Starfleet, until there was the very powerful and emotional scene at the end when he learned the truth about what he had been experiencing and what happened to him. One of the great moments in the 7 years of the series, I think that, and one that I know I felt very emotional about performing when we shot that scene. And the next thing we know is he's recovering and coming round on the bridge of the Enterprise, having been unconscious for something like 3 minutes, I think, but in fact lived this entire lifetime in another planet. 25 minutes.
Please stand corrected.
Do you know how much I hate you? Couldn't you just let me say 3 minutes and let it go at that? All right, 25 minutes it was, that's okay. Oh dear, I know so little about this show anyway, and I know I do, I really do. You know, somebody asked me a question the other day, and I said I wouldn't know a warp core breach if it got into bed with me. And,
well, now, of course, it's a drink here in Vegas. That's what the Warp Core Breach is really known as. It's
really?
a drink
Is that-
here, yeah.
is that so?
A bubbling, cloudy drink. So.
Are you serious?
I'm serious, right? We used to get it at Star Trek The Experience. Let's hear it for Star Trek The Experience. We miss it. We used to run our shows at the Hilton, those of you that have been with us long enough. Margot, my dear, tell us how the role came to you.
I tell a lot of people this when they come up and talk to me, and to me, it just adds to this feeling that I have that it was sort of this magical, otherworldly thing that brought me to this episode and this part, and that is that I had auditioned for Junie Lowry, who is the casting director.
The master, Junie Lowry.
I had auditioned for Star Trek for Junie almost maybe 6 times. Oh yes, over
For other roles.
for other roles, starting in maybe 1990. Actually, I know that it was as long ago as that, because before I came here, I grabbed some scripts. You know, people love those. Oh, grab some scripts, and the ones I just have, and one of them was something I had auditioned for in 1990, First Contact, and I was asked what part.
The movie, First Contact, the movie.
No, an episode,
Oh, an episode.
called First Contact.
An episode, the First Contact episode.
Yeah, and no, just the episode, and I was just asking the meet and read, like, what part did you read for? I said, I don't know. Some part. But I auditioned and auditioned and auditioned, and when I finally got to this, clearly I just was never quite right for any of the other ones. And when I got to this, for whatever reasons, the best TV role I ever got to do, I booked the part. And to me, that's just like, whoa, that's...
I think that Patrick was incredibly generous as a companion actor
Oh, yeah.
in the relationship to your character, and the way that Cayman relates to Eline is so touching and romantic and real that you are very blessed to have Patrick, who could give so much to you and then end up with something that felt so real and memorable.
Yes, I think we immediately, made a connection, got it about each other, and that's the other thing I'm asked all the time is, you seem so, it's so real, this relationship, and
So genuine.
yes, so genuine. And what was it like? And how did you get? Did you rehearse for months? But of course, it was the regular TV schedule, 10 days, whatever it was, and we rehearsed as much as you can for television. But I think we kind of dropped into our spot, very, very quickly.
It's called chemistry.
Yes. How about that?
Definitely.
Right? Yes. And you don't get it that often. I personally think it's a stroke of luck or fate or whatever to get it, and to get it in spades the way I felt it with this lovely gentleman. And that's from that everything could blossom. From that initial chemistry and that yes, I see you, you see me, we're on this track and and here we go, and trusted each other. And he's a wonderful actor.
Yeah, I mean, it's serendipity and it's fortuitous, but also it is great craft work. And that ultimately has to bring the thing home, and that's what you have in this episode, is tremendous acting craft, and that's what sells it ultimately. Now, I kind of broke the episode up because I guess TV is in a 5-act form, is that right? So in the second act, we find Cayman beginning to adjust to the reality, or rather, Picard adjusting to the reality that he is now becoming Cayman and a member of this community, and he begins to grapple with the penny whistle or flute, whatever you want to call it, but he begins to deal with this thing. And Morgan, I feel like the penny whistle has got to be a metaphor for something. As Picard or Cayman slowly develops a mastery over the instrument, he also is becoming more organically assimilated into their society. And so the evolution on the flute seems to me to be a metaphor for...
Well, it's for, as you said, he had to become a village everyman, transition from being this very commanding presence as a captain to being a guy who actually has time to just sit around and work on playing the flute, and his greatest successes end up being as a husband and father in this village. But the flute was, I came up with that actually less as a metaphor, as we had to have something to show the viewers that he was a changed person. That if only, to be accurate, 25 minutes, that's what Riker said. Riker wasn't keeping good track. I thought, considering his captain's lying there, he should know the exact time. And he's very casual about it. He says, 25 minutes. I was in 10 forward getting a cinnamon bun. So he comes back after this short time, and we have to see that Picard is part Cayman now, permanently. When I've talked about this, some people think, oh, it's like a dream, you wake up for a dream. But it wasn't a dream, you were changed, had these memories forever. So when you think of how we're going to telegraph that to the audience, it had to be something that would be universal across different civilizations, and I think by process of elimination, you end up with a flute for some reason.
No, it's a wonderful device. How can you kind of describe the Catan civilization? It seems agricultural or agrarian. How would you describe that civilization?
It was supposed to be a simple civilization, but this is the beauty of television, how it works, how it really does take a village. So I'd already mentioned Joe Menosky, who was a writer on the show. You all know Darmok. Joe wrote Darmok. Joe is a friend of mine, and as I said, he's the one who got me in there originally. And Joe just had this one comment. He wasn't in the room very much when we were working in the writer's room, but he said, I think Cayman is an iron weaver. And nobody knew what the hell that meant. That if you look during the episode, he's never had a loom, he's not weaving anything, there's no iron. But just by Joe Menosky saying iron weaver, it sort of connoted some kind of artisanal craft. And that's how we got into the whole thing of it being a very artisanal kind of civilization. It's amazing how these things work.
So we get to the third act, and we begin to see he's taken a wife, and he has a child, and then he has another child, and we're beginning to feel this sense that Picard has really, in essence, become a family man on this planet. And so Patrick, at that point, if you can remember, sort of midway through the work, your attempts to push back Picard's personality and be Cayman's personality. What was your process in kind of delivering that transformation?
It was the most interesting aspect of the work. Already being a fully formed individual in one world, in one life. And then as the adjustments were made to a different way of living, which it wasn't as if there was a feeling, well, somebody will come and rescue him or something will happen. That wasn't going to happen. He had said goodbye to the previous life. And it was how to blend the new experiences and the new person that he was becoming with Jean-Luc. And how much of Jean-Luc could we hold over into scene after scene that would still be authentic to the man that he had been. Sometimes I hesitate to say potentially negative things when I'm talking to our fans like this, because it would seem mean-spirited. And I don't want you to misunderstand, as I said last night, those of you who are here, I don't want you to misunderstand where I and the others of us from Next Generation are coming from. But it was rare. I got to be so careful what I say here now. It was quite rare to find an episode which challenged us as actors. We all had them at different times. Don't get me wrong, this wasn't an isolated incident. On the contrary, we had a great writer's room who were continually coming up with original things, but rarely for Picard. And so I was absolutely caught up in this world because it was giving me acting challenges that were not customary on Next Generation, and whenever that occurred, I always embraced them. That's why I enjoyed the holodeck so much, because you could play a fantasy life of being Dixon Hill or whoever. And so it was special to me for that reason, that I had to bring a slightly different process to bear on being Captain Picard in The Next Generation that I'd not had before. And it was a fascinating challenge, and one that I don't know if it was successful, but there were specific objectives that I was aiming for, which were becoming a new person, Kamen, while retaining elements of who I had been, Jean-Luc.
No, it was wildly successful, and really the different acts helped to each give you a stepping stone into each further evolution of the character, which is why it works so well. Also the fact that there really isn't an antagonist per se. You're not flexing the same kind of muscles. And that's what's great about the episode. It's really more the challenge of, you know, accepting your new life and personality and the evolution and transformation of that character. But there is an antagonistic force, not a person, but an antagonistic force working against you, which is that the planet is slowly dying. And even before you realize it, Geordi LaForge, who cleverly discovers, is able to trace back the origin of this probe, traces it back to a star system which is dead. And already it's kind of a foreboding feeling, wait a second, this thing comes from a place where there's no life. So the third act has already kind of foreshadowed kind of what's going to happen. So then Morgan, I mean, was it kind of you that was responsible for coming in with the idea for the breaks and the punctuation of the 5 acts?
You know, I think,
how does that get set?
I think that's where it gets very collaborative, because I had already spent, as I said, 5 months honing this pitch, getting it right, and then working with the writers on staff. I was a freelance writer, working with the writers on staff and sharpening it and coming up with a story, which then I go off and write up the story in prose form, and we get some notes, and then I write the script. I think at some point I don't know if we talked about specific act breaks, but we made a key decision that I think affected the whole script, which was how we were going to show the passage of time. So here's the bad way to do it, which we didn't do. You cut to Kamen looking out the window, and then the scene changes and there's snow falling, so you know the seasons have changed. We resisted doing that, and we decided that between commercial breaks,
the act changes.
The act changes are where we're only gonna jump ahead in time in Kamen's life during the act change.
And it's a great device, much better.
And once we came upon that, and I can't say at this point, we're so collaborative at that point. It's me with Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor. I wouldn't be able to say who exactly said that, but we agreed, and that was a key device that affected this episode. And I think that's what gives you the feeling that he's changing and yet retaining Picard, because if it had been like kind of a scene, then a scene, then a scene, you'd lose track of it. But every time you came back, then I don't want to step on what you're doing, but he comes back and his children are older. It keeps growing with each act.
Yeah, I mean, each act feels almost like a mini movie or a mini story unto itself, which is remarkable. Margot, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Eline's character arc over the course of the episode. Can you kind of relate it to us, how it was for you, and how your process and sort of following that transformation and that character arc?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I just today, especially because today and yesterday, you know, my head is full, you know, of the people that have come and spoken to me and the questions they ask, you know, and the observations they make. And this one fellow came up and asked me if we rehearsed, or if there was, you know, a script before or whatever, who was your husband before it was Picard? Do you know? Like, he must have been bald, or, you know, like that. And you know, my answer was no. no, we didn't have a backstory of, me with, Marvin as my first husband or anything, and if there's a Marvin out there, I'm sorry, but it was, I never approached it from any other place, other than this is my present, and this man is my husband. There was never some other like, oh, now he's him. It was never like that. This was the only reality that I had as an actor approaching the part ever. It wasn't like, well, what he's a visitor here, it's his memory. It was just I believe is the only way I could see it and approach it and work it was that this is my present, this is my world. There's nothing else here but what you all see, what I see. And this guy, I remember the day we were married. Best day in my life. And I think the main thing that happens at the beginning is that I just think that he's saying kind of weird, nutty stuff, and he must have a big fever still. I think when you hear people do that in life, we don't necessarily go nuts at first. It's like, this is my guy and I love him and he's been ill and whoa, why are you saying that? But I'm not gonna say that to you. I'm just gonna say, you must not feel too good. And I think that what happens with her, and that's off screen, is as time goes on, clearly Jean-Luc Picard came in, tells his wife where he came from. That obviously doesn't happen right away. And she's like, do you want soup? And he's like, anything you could tell. And, it's like, but I'm accepting it because he's my husband and I love him and there's not an ER available. It's like, right? So let's just ride this out. And clearly between, I don't know what of the acts, I think 2 and 3 maybe, if we're breaking it up that way, my husband speaks to me about this place that he's from. So I think I have no choice but to get on that train and ride it, because I have to, whether I really think it makes any sense, I have to believe it from him. So I think that arc is that I don't know what the hell he's talking about, and come on back to me, come back to me. And when he tells me, it's, I think, good news because he's sharing that. He's letting me in on this weird secret that I've wondered about. The bad news is that he is still not all the way here.
Absent.
He's absent. And she talks about that to him and challenges. I challenge him at a certain point, like, you're still not all here, dude, you're still half gone, you're still partly gone. I want all of you here. And he's still holding on to say, how can you expect, and did you ever love any, you never talked about anybody that you loved there. What's that all about? But in which he does not answer that question, but just, you can't expect me to let go of a whole lifetime.
And that dynamic tension of Picard came in straddling 2 lives and 2 personalities is part of the genius of the show, and also, forgive me for saying it, Patrick, but an amazing performance from you, delivering that in that manner. It's a remarkable performance. So I realize we have people with some questions. We get to the 5th act, and Picard came in, suddenly has his epiphany. Oh my God, I am the messenger for a society. And how did you approach that final revelation and this transformative moment for Picard Kamen?
Well, moments like that simply have to be lived and not technically prepared for. We have something in our profession called sense memory. And I was taught the different aspects of sense memory when I was at drama school. You know what I'm talking about. So for actors, and I'm sure it applies for writers and maybe for people who run businesses, nothing is ever wasted on you, ever. I mean, the other day I had injections into my knuckles of my hand for my arthritis. And it was, you know, when doctors say, this might be a little uncomfortable. Well, I had to have 8 injections, and by the second one, I truly did not know how I was going to make it. But I did. And I made it by saying to myself, remember how this feels, Patrick. Take it all on board, the pain, the worst of it, the fear that you feel of the next needle going in. Store it all away, because one day you might need it. Actually, I've already used that in something that I've just finished filming. So this sense memory thing is wonderful because it means that no experience is ever wasted. And so, and here's the thing about sense memory. I'm sorry, I'm
Please.
Diversion here, but the sense memory that the actor has does not have to be identical with what the character in the film or the play is experiencing. Rather, what it does, it gives you an impulse of a feeling of what it felt like when you were having an experience, and you use the feeling in the dramatic reconstruction, the play or the movie or whatever it is. So you can blend all kinds of experiences to make a new one in an acting situation, and that's very much what I remember doing in those moments towards the end of the episode.
It's kind of a muscle memory in a certain sense.
Yes, it is. It is. You know, we all have different ways of doing this, but I have certain triggers that I can pull for certain emotions, and they act and work instantly. If I am emotional and moved and tearful, I have one trigger I pull, and I'm right there with the emotions filling my body and my mind. And it's valuable to actors to be able to have these assets that you can draw on from time to time. And they're not all just to do with unhappiness. Sometimes they're to do with happiness. And it's one of the most interesting aspects of what we do, and it doesn't actually get talked about that much. Nobody's ever asked me to do inside the actor's studio, so I've never had the choice. But I'm prepped for it, yes, indeed.
It's a pretty well much 2001 moment when it hits in the episode. I mean, it just is a really incredibly powerful moment. And what you've done is all three of you have helped create, you know, a timeless classic, really the best of what Next Generation could be and was. And really, we all want to salute you for that amazing job.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I want to say something too. There were only a handful of episodes in which I was spending most of my time with other characters other than the crew. And that made a huge difference. And the cast of Inner Light, all the people that I spent my working days with while we shot that episode, were so immersed in what they did, so truthful in their interpretations of the characters. The acting skills were outstanding from everyone, and certainly from you. You know, and it was invigorating to be having that experience. Captain's Holiday was another one that happened a little bit like that too, and so that is, I think, my dominant memory of how much I enjoyed acting those scenes. One of the things that isn't too well known about this episode is that the director of this episode had never directed anything before. And he was very insecure. He's a terrific man and great at what he actually did, his other job. But at lunchtime on our first day, the director of photography took me aside and said, "We have a problem. Here's what I propose. I think we're going to have to run this episode pretty much ourselves. So here's what I suggest. I will direct the cameras, you direct the actors." Oh, a difficult situation to be in. But I found myself in the company of actors whom I could express myself freely to and talk about the work that we were doing. And it made for me an app, because I directed some of the shows, but I'm not really a director. And it made
like
it.
one.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's all faking. I'm a good faker. It was one of the most authentic and rewarding experiences that I had, because our Marvin, there's your Marvin for you, our Marvin had given me this additional role to play in this particular episode, which also makes it, because I was carrying a different responsibility, it makes it one of the handful of most important episodes in the whole series.
Right on. Yeah.
Just as a PS to this, because I've recounted this in several different ways that are, I have that I try to be very politic about it, and sometimes don't say what it really was, but just that you were very involved, in all the angles and all the, that you were involved, to a great extent, and I've mentioned to a few people surreptitiously, that story, but the one thing that I would add as a PS to this is that one of the things that I remember the most and carried with me is that the original director of this was grateful for the help, and that you and the DP Marvin were given an awkward situation that obviously we knew about, that you were so gracious, and there was no pushing aside or hostility or resentment. It was just like, okay, we need to help.
It was collaboration.
Yes, and we have to help this out, and this engine's got to move, and you did it in a lovely, as I said, kind and gracious way, and that always impressed me.
You see why I liked working with her so much.
But you mailed the check?
And we're going to take it to audience questions, but I will say, since it always starts with the words on the page, Morgan, great job.
Yes.
Great job.
Well, the key word you've heard tonight is collaboration. And it's on both in front of and behind the camera, and it's really crucial.
An amazing collaboration, yes, as you well know, my friend. Okay, we're going to take it out to the audience. Can we get any lights on people in the audience? I don't know if we can, but we'll start over there on the left. People get lights on our question people if we can. Thank you.
Sir Patrick Stewart, 2 years ago, I was truly touched by your openness and willingness to share about elements of your childhood and your work around domestic violence. So my question to you is, can you speak to what are some of the biggest challenges you have faced in your work to bring attention to and stop domestic violence?
Are you asking me in connection with my acting work or my campaigning?
Your campaigning.
We're a little off the subject here.
Yeah, it's really not, this is not really the forum for that, but if you want to take 30 seconds.
Yeah, I will, because it's thank
It is
you for the
important.
question. And
I
it
didn't
is
approach the subject with you yesterday.
My childhood introduced me to the world of domestic violence, and there was nothing that I could do to help that situation then, but try to keep myself safe and my brother, and most importantly, my mother. And then I became aware about 12, 14 years ago of an organization called Refuge in England, who had read a statement that I had made about issues to do with domestic violence, and particularly with the way in which the police approach these matters in an unhelpful and mostly ineffectual and sometimes dangerous way. So I was invited to get involved with the organization, with Refuge. They're a charity, and they are the biggest domestic violence body in the UK, and have made enormous advances, particularly in those areas of how the law handles issues of domestic violence. There have been great changes, and I applaud the police for that. So that's, you know, I don't have a lot of spare time, but I make speeches and I write things, and whenever I can, I appear at events. And I have found now that, and I do these things for my mother, because I couldn't do things for her then. I was helpless. And I have to add this, because over the years, my father got a very bad press from me. And a few years ago, during a program for the BBC called Who Do You Think You Are, and finding to my absolute astonishment and dismay the subject of the program was going to be my father. During that program, I learned what I had never known, my brother had never known, and I suspect my mother had never known, that in 1940, my father returned with the British Expeditionary Force, who were able to escape from France. It's what Dunkirk is about, the movie that's out now. Well, he was one of the last people. He left on the last boat out of France, and he returned to England suffering with severe PTSD, for which there was no treatment then. Men were just told, be a man and pull yourself together. Which is no good at all. And and I've discussed this with experts on this matter, all of my father's behavior was classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. He was ill. Now, that does not mean that I condone the violence, but he was sick, and nobody for one single moment gave him any help. So now, for my father, I work for an organization called Combat Stress, which particularly deals with the issue of PTSD.
Very good. Can we please stay on point with our questions, okay? Questions about inner life, please.
Well, Mr. Stewart, what methods do you use in Inner Way and other episodes in acting when you feel like you can't do it anymore? What triggers do you use to motivate yourself when you have no more energy, you're completely exhausted? And thank you for explaining all that you have on your perspective of acting. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It was for Patrick, see? He tried to pass it to me.
I thought that, no, I wasn't passing it to you. I wasn't dodging the issue. I thought that you would address the question to all of us, to the three of us. When conditions are difficult, I talk to people. I think that's what I usually do. I look for advice and counsel and help in trying to find a way out of the problems that I'm stuck with. And, you know, show business people get, on the whole, a pretty bad press. You know, we're completely self-absorbed, we're arrogant, we are patronizing, so many things. in my experience, that is absolutely not the case. Somebody said to me the other day, how do you want to die, Patrick? And I said, in a rehearsal room surrounded by actors. And they are the most generous, the most giving people, the most concerned when somebody is in trouble or has a problem. And I have a couple of close, dear friends who are actors, and I will go to them and ask them, what do I do? What would you do in this situation? I recommend that as an approach to difficulties.
All right, we're going to have time for one or two more questions. Morgan, I think you have something for...
No, they did that already.
Oh, okay. And there was something from the Roddenberry.com. You know about this? The Roddenberrys created a gorgeous... Roddenberry Group has created a Catan Probe pendant, which they want to present to, I believe, Patrick or you, Margot. I'm not sure, but... Oh, then that's yours, dear.
Don't take my...
And it's amazing. I mean, the Roddenberry Group, they're always coming up with these gorgeous items, and this is this gorgeous Catan Pro pendant. Why don't you hold it up? Maybe people can see it on the camera. I don't know. Just gorgeous.
Adam, can I make a comment about this probe? Because one of the things that was so exciting for me, I'm putting the words down, and then this whole crew is going to make the episode. I had written that I wanted there to be a way that Picard, when he's first on this other planet, recognizes something that ties it back to what he had seen on the Enterprise. So I wrote that Eline was wearing a necklace and it had an inscription on it that matched some alien handwriting he had seen. To my joy, I saw that what the production crew came up with is they made the probe and the necklace the exact same shape.
Perfect.
I thought that was brilliant.
That's great. All right, we've really got time for just one more question, please.
Hi, my question's for Margot.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi.
It's not a plant.
I was wondering, when you portrayed the character, did it differ at all from how you originally thought you would portray it when you got the script? When you started interacting with Sir Patrick and the rest of the cast, did it change at all from how you thought you would originally do it?
That's a great question, and I think that what I usually do is I read that script. I knew I wanted to do it. I think I probably had an element of what I ended up doing in my audition, which was some sort of something intrinsic to what they wanted for Eline, and some manner, and something about my whole persona. And I had an idea, of course, or ideas, but they're not hard and fast when I read a script. I don't know about you, Patrick, but I have ideas, I see it, I visualize it, but I, for one, feel as though they sort of go out the window, not that they're not still there, but I'm not carrying them with me when I walk into a first table reading, if it's television, or if it's theater or first rehearsal. And I had them, they're still back here, but the best thing I can do is simply show up and listen as much as I can, which is the biggest thing. When I see an actor who listens on stage, it is the most compelling thing that you can watch, is somebody who's engaged and listening when they're not even talking. And I look at them and I go, wow, you got it. And that's what I strive for, is to just simply be present and not have too many preconceived things about what I want to do, and just take it from the moment, And that's so much of what I got to do, and that I think we were lucky enough to do in the episode. We were both, and God, Sir Patrick, you get to be present, and the ship sails and you have lots of work in you, but you don't know exactly where it's going.
Is it like that writing? Is there something similar?
Yes.
Well, there you have it. Inquiring minds wanted to know, and now we know. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a big round of applause for Margot Rose, Morgan Gendel, and Mr. Sir Patrick Stewart. Give them a big round of applause, folks.